Welcome to the Infinite and Beyond, the MIT Alumni Show. I'm your trusted host, Rob Kalwarowsky, MIT Class of 2010, world-renowned executive coach, author, and speaker. Each week, we are sharing the stories with our friends and classmates, fellow MIT alumni who've taken action to shape the world. We'll share what we've learned, top strategies, and bring our community together to help everyone achieve our goals. No, this show is not officially affiliated with MIT, so any views expressed on this show are of the host and guest only. This show is designed to build a community that trusts, connects, and shares with each other so we can all take action towards a better world. Let's get rolling. Welcome back to the Infinite and Beyond MIT Alumni Show. And of course, I'm your host, Rob Kalwarowsky, but today I am not hosting. We're handing it over to the brains behind the show and also my lead booker. Camo's with us again. Camo, how are you?
What's up, Rob? I will not take credit for being any sort of brains. If everyone knows me, that's not a descriptor for me. But I am joyful and joyous to be here. And thank you, brother, for really taking the charge here. I think the momentum is unbelievable going into our reunion here in 2 months. So thank you.
We're having a ton of fun with the show. We just released Chris Moses' episode today, but in podcast land, it'll be last week. Filled with wisdom. Obviously, Chris is the entrepreneur in residence at MIT and just an absolute rock star. So if anyone out there is on their entrepreneurial journey, check that one out because it's full of great tips.
Dude, I actually, honestly, and I know we're biased because these are our classmates, but I really do think the richness of this podcast from all the different perspectives. I mean, you have people like Alex Murphy, who is quite honestly one of the smartest people that I've ever met or know, right? So we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about medicine, we're talking about finance, we're talking about personal growth. So the reality is I've actually spread this podcast to a lot of just my own LA community, and everyone is so fascinated by it. So let's keep this thing up, man. This is awesome.
MIT Nerds Unite.
Nerds are cool, man. Listen, humanoid robots, that's the generation, the age that we're in, and there's a lot of us MITers behind it, so it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. So Camo, where are we going today?
Yeah, so welcome to the hot seat, all right? Welcome to reversing, as Michael Scott says, how the turntables have turned, all right? So Rob, my question to you, brother, is why don't you just give us the rundown, the journey from MIT graduation to what looks like a tropical paradise that you're in today?
Absolutely. So, of course, for folks out there, like I'm course 2A with 15. After graduation, I moved to Western Canada and worked as a engineer in a coal mining company. There was 5 mines in the area, and I was working servicing all 5 of them. And that's where I encountered my first asshole boss, and I can say asshole because it's my show. And really, there was I was in this space, and I think a lot of folks out there were as well early in our careers, is we've been told for 4 years that we're the best and the brightest, and we're future leaders, and we're all these things. And I had this idea in my mind, and I was like, well, everybody is just driven by profits, right? Like I took,
Right.
Economics, I took, 15401, 501, and it's like the whole point of a company is to generate returns for investors.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, great. And so I saved my company a ton of money, like tens of millions of dollars. And my boss actually did not like that.
Why? Wait. Why is that? You're achieving the mission. Why was there some jealousy involved, or what do you think happened?
So that's the perspective I see today and it's not jealousy. He's a people pleaser. And what he wanted was not to disrupt status quo and do things differently, even though like outwardly he would say like, oh, like I want you to go out and do this. But then it was like really what he wanted was he wanted his boss to be happy with him. And so that's why the things would go back and forth. So it'd be like, hey, Camo, can you go do this? And then tomorrow it'd be like, no, don't do that. Do the opposite of that.
Yeah, got it.
And
Got
like
it.
for someone like in this mode of like high achiever, and also like everything I was doing is just data. It's numbers. It's just fact. They did not want fact.
So there's like a political game almost then within this company.
Yeah. And ultimately that led to me becoming depressed and a suicide attempt in 2013. And what happened there is like, I don't want to talk about that necessarily, but really the part that I really want to give to people is what happened around that. The next day I woke up and I went to work again. And I
Whoa.
knew consciously my job was killing me, and I knew that, I needed out, but I was stuck in the brain. And this is actually statistically proven out that folks that have these suicide attempts and survive, they go out and they do the same thing.
So literally next day, like there was no break, pause. Like it's like one day I see you, next day that happens in the evening, the next day I'm your coworker and I just see you again. That's unbelievable. I'm so sorry, one, that that happened and the experience and the trauma that you experienced. I literally got goosebumps thinking about it, and I'm so, so, so sorry. But it's even wilder to think that that's just what happened. Like it was no big deal. Like, please tell me more.
Yeah. So the thing is, right, is I was caught in this beliefs, just like we talked with Chris last week. All of us as twins, the reason we got in MIT is because we're high achievers. We had something inside of us that was like, you're not good enough, you don't belong, you're something. And that made us go, well, we're going to overperform at school and at other things. And that's what got us in MIT, right? And it makes
Yeah.
us successful. And everybody, like all of us, like we still have that part of us, right? Whether it's dominant or not, but that's what made us successful. And it always works up to a point. And when it stops working, that's when folks feel that either depression or burnout, or it's like they get a divorce or they get fired from their job or something happens. And then they walk through my door as a coach now.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, man. So it's interesting that you were able to take all of that, what could be called pain or experience, and then rework that in and of it yourself, master it, conquer it, to then be the other voice and the reason. Tell me more about like how that shifted. Like, so next day you're back at the office, but then how did you process everything?
Yeah, that took me years. And that's not crazy, right? Like it's totally normal. Basically, I went into protection mode. And from 2013 to 2017, I sort of drifted through life. And then I actually have to credit my roommate and fellow polo player at MIT, Mark Arts. In
Mark,
2017, I went to visit him, Tennessee. It was partly an excuse to go to the football game, but we were chatting in his living room, and he was talking about how he was reading Warren Buffett's book, and it like went into my mind. And it was like, Rob, you stop learning.
yeah, huge, huge. As a lifelong learner, high achiever learner, you get out of the institute and yeah, you really do stop learning academically, and now it's a whole different thing you have to learn, right, about life.
Yeah, and for me, it was like I had deliberately stopped because it caused me pain.
Mm.
It was like, because I would listen, like I tried to listen to some of these podcasts like early, and it was like, well, you're not doing this or you're not successful. And that was like the voices I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then it's like, I had that moment with Mark, and I went home and I downloaded basically the top. I was like, what are the top 10 entrepreneurship podcasts out there? And then that led me to starting my own podcast in 2018 on this journey, really to get out of corporate. Like I just wanted to run like a one person engineering consultancy, like not have a manager, not deal with the nonsense. And then that led me to a coach, which led me into therapy and then all this personal growth and obviously all the coaching that I know. And then that actually led me to ultimately, like 5 years ago, basically, I was depressed corporate engineer today. Since then, I suppose I've, pivoted careers. I did a TEDx talk. Now it's at over 300,000 views.
Let's
I've written
go.
a book. It's coming out in the fall. Actually, we just pivoted it. We'll talk about that probably
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
But I have a book coming out in the fall. And like I've coached some of the top folks on the planet, from like Fortune 500 C-suite executives to Olympic
Amazing.
gold medalists to, people like that. Yeah.
That's incredible, man. Well, congratulations on your journey and finding that pivot. And I'm sure there's so many people listening that can relate or maybe are not expressing what you are expressing, right? And one of the things that I just heard that you say that was so powerful is that you, unbeknownst maybe even to Mark, you asked for help and you found the help that you asked for, right? And how hard that is to do, coming from the background of feeling like, oh, we don't need help, we know we got everything, right? And so the messaging that I'm hearing, which I think is so powerful, is ask for help, right? Ask for it, and it'll come to you. Would you say that the people now that you're coaching, right? How is it that you are providing them the counsel and the help? What are the things that you're doing and allowing them to find within themselves?
Yeah. So this is why I pivoted my book. So for folks out there, my previous book, which we actually wrote the whole manuscript and it was being pitched to publishers. We actually signed a deal and it fell through because the publisher went under. That's a whole other story.
Jeez.
But really, in this last, I would say 4 weeks, like a lot is going on. And I had a moment where I realized like everything clicked for me. And so, context, like I was working with a coaching company. I left them, somewhere in the fall of last year. Now I'm working on my own. I'm doing a speaker program because I want to, well, I'm already somewhat professionally speaking, but I wanted to really scale that. And so that was something that I really like. Their program is designed to help scale that. And so I was doing that, which was forcing me to relook at the small things in the business. So things like, what's your positioning statement? Who's your target audience? How are you aligning everything that you're doing to have just one direction? And like take my clients through the 4-step journey that we're going to talk about. But I had a book that was just like, it was basically off of TED, and it was like, we wanted asshole boss in the title because it was like, it's so cool. And
Resonates.
people will, watch it like in an airport, you'll see it and you'll be like, I want that. Right.
Yeah, totally.
But it's not going to, but the folks that are at the level that I want to coach, the C-suite executives, are not buying that book because they don't have a boss, or they don't, it's like it's not something that they're going to buy. And so the book is now called Capitalizing on Chaos. And it really walks through the 4 steps of both personal and leadership transformation.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, well, we'll definitely need to talk about those 4 steps. But before we do, I would love to kind of put a bow on the college side, the aspect that has brought us together. And even though we didn't really cross paths often in college, I would love to know kind of when you look back at MIT, what were some of those happy moments that you had or the most impactful moments that you had in those 4 years?
Yeah. So there's some funny ones, of course, like as part of Delta Upsilon that I won't talk about. But one of the funniest things, actually, like I still remember this, was Rosto and I, he was early on the show, so go back in the archives, but we were part of international orientation because I'm Canadian, he's from Slovakia. And so it was like mid-August of 2000, and we went to one of these things with the other 90-ish international students, and there was like, it was like elementary school. They had these like plastic buckets full of these little milks. And like it was in preseason, so we were training, like I was training 7 hours a day. He was training less than that, but still a lot. And we sat there after the lecture was over and just like drank like 10 milks.
No way. That's so funny.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's wild. It's so funny how like in college, so much of our community surrounded around food and free food, right?
Yep.
Like I remember my first real like community thing was like Bexley dumpster diving. where we would go find old naked juices that were just about to expire and
Yep.
like literally dump in divesters or into trash cans. And it was just wild to think about that. And like how during Greek Griller, it was all about who has the best food and where, or the best booze and where, right? So it's just very primal that way, and I find it's a really good way to connect. So that's amazing. What else? Give me. I do need one DU story if you have.
Yeah, I mean, the like one of the fun ones we do is during rush week, and we have KY jelly wrestling. And well, actually, the other one is really funny. Was we did a beach event for Rush, and so we literally took bags of sand up 5 stories to the roof, and we created DU Beach.
Oh my God, I think I remember that honestly. That's wild. That's
That was
absolutely wild.
quite the event, but also just the setup was a ton of work.
I mean, listen, the Greek community at MIT was so strong, shockingly strong, right? Like, but it makes sense because you want to create a lifelong bond with people that 15 years from now that you can go back to and talk to. Do you guys still all kind of communicate within each other, within your pledge class and your fraternity?
Yeah, I chat around with folks, and every once in a while host a like a Zoom meetup, but it's not as much as I would like. And that's, I mean, this is the nice part about this show and us all getting together in May is we'll finally get in person, and then we'll hopefully start doing more of these more often.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should honestly do this once a year, not just every 15 years. And so, kind of coming to the tail end of your MIT career and your college career, I actually had a client tell me that their children are no longer able to get jobs. And they go to LMU, they don't go to MIT, but regardless, statistics are showing that like 80% even up to of kids are not graduating with jobs. Did you have a job offer leaving MIT?
No. And you remember this, right? Is there was that market crash 2008, 2009, and then when it would have been 2009 September, right? Is the career fair. And I remember walking around, it was like Morgan Stanley. The sign was on the booth, nobody was there. And it's like
No
it was
way.
a yeah, it was like a fair amount of folks that were like that at that time,
Wow.
right? And so I was unemployed for like we graduated in June. I was unemployed till it was around January of
Whoa.
2011, like basically like 9 months or whatever, or
Yeah.
6 months. And I applied to Duke for their master's in engineering management. But yeah, then I found a job instead.
Wow. I mean, so that's interesting, right? I feel like grad school is kind of the safety net for people. It's like, hey, I didn't get the job I wanted, or I'm still trying to figure this out, so I'll just go to grad school. And like, that's not a free option for everyone, in this country, right? Like, that's a benefit that we had often. But so now you're got the job. We talked a little bit about your career, but are there a couple things that you really learned from even the corporate life to now, obviously, what you're doing now, which is arguably more, I think, way more important and special. So maybe we can kind of go over some of the lessons that you've learned throughout your journey.
Yeah, the biggest thing here is, and it's part of what I teach people in the book, right? Is it's getting back to who you are. And so the book, if we're talking about the 4 step process, first step is a gap analysis. Obviously, we're engineers, we're problem solvers. Everybody does this, right?
Could you
What is your
describe what
goal?
gap analysis is?
Yeah. So basically, if you have a goal, you look at, okay, here it is. And then you look at where I am today, and you look at, okay, what is the gap that's between me and my goal? What do I have to learn? What do I have to do?
Got it. So it's not generally accepted accounting principles. Got it. It's an actual
Yeah, it's
gap.
very
Yeah,
simple in
yeah, yeah.
engineering, or if anyone out there, like their management consultants or basically any type of
Like
consultant,
SWOT gap. Okay,
it's all
cool.
the same stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay, yeah. Heard.
And so that's the first step. Of course, and generally I take folks like I can get a pretty good idea in our first session. Obviously, that evolves as we go deeper, but generally, I have a pretty good idea after 1 or 2 calls, like what is the problem with the folks, or not the problem, but what do we need to work on? Then the second step is removing the masks, and this is the psychology work that I do, and this is where I talk about it in my TED, but my high achieving self, I call or a lot of people also called me, my coaches used to call me Reliable Rob. And it was like, you want someone to do something shitty, but he'll do it. Like he'll guard the biggest guy. He'll do what he needs to do. He'll just make it happen.
You're a glue
Right.
guy. You're that grinder.
And that was what I thought I was. And it's a part of me, of course. I still use that part of me today when I need to grind it for my business, or I need to, put in work or these kind of things. But it's not me, right? And all of us listening, I mean, if you're an MIT 2010, there's a part of you that's probably a perfectionist or a high achieving part, or if you have a people pleasing part, like there are very common parts that almost all of us have, right? That step is about finding out who are the dominant parts that we have, and then allowing them to relax back so we can find out who we truly are.
It's incredible. I mean, it is such an interesting concept of who you feel you are and who you are to the world. And that can often be in total confluence with each other, right? And to find that joy in life is probably to actually represent externally what you feel internally. And that takes a lot of time to figure that out. It's almost like the elevator pitch. And an exercise that I've done, even amongst my friends and family, it's like, how would you describe me to someone else? And when you can overhear those things, right? Like when you walk you're at a party, you go to a restroom, you come back out, and you hear someone describing, oh, this is Kamo, this is Rob, someone else, and you're like, wait, is that what people think of me? Like, and you hope that I'm sure it's all good, but it's like, oh, interesting. And then think about it yourself. What are those 3 words or 3 descriptors that you would use to really pitch yourself to someone? So I guess the question is to you, Rob, like you're in an elevator with, Tim Cook, and you have that 5 seconds to talk. What are the 3 biggest descriptors you would use for yourself?
Yes, I always use wisdom, growth, and relentlessness.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Now, do you think that's what is coming outwardly? So is that what your wife, your friends, your family would use to describe you as well?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah, no, 100%. Wisdom for sure. It's interesting when you said reliable, Rob, because we had just talked yesterday, because we talk all the time now, about, a situation where someone's asking you for something, right? And you're consistently someone that, because you're so giving and empathetic, right? But how that can also kind of weigh on you and decrease your battery, right? So you're a big battery guy to me. I mean, you have a huge charge, right? But, understanding how you can protect your charge at times, I think is super important.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and of course, I think obviously MIT is a descriptor. Number one, I've realized that has become a real thing. When people describe you, just literally like, oh yeah, I went to school with them. I went to MIT with them. Like we paid for those 3 letters, and those 3 letters get used a lot. I think everyone that went to our school, that's got to be one of the 3.
Yeah. It's funny, right? Is my dad, he was very big on, like, you have this degree in engineering, you have to stay in engineering, otherwise you've wasted $200,000. And it's like people hire me today as an executive coach because I went to MIT.
Yeah,
they look
absolutely.
at it and they go, I know something about you, and that means something. And it was funny, right? Like I'm coaching, like when I started working with Nokia, like I was coaching folks from Nokia Bell Labs, which Bell Labs is one of the most famous labs that's in the world, right? And these people are postdocs. They're like, they're geniuses, right? But it's like, it was so funny because they immediately were trusting in me. They're like, yeah, I applied to MIT when I was a bachelor and I didn't get in.
It's a thing. It's absolutely a thing. No doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that kind of helps people put you in a certain context, I think they will naturally. It just helps sorts things. So yeah, so we're talking about the 4, right? So let's continue there.
Yeah. So after we start removing the mask is exactly the stage that you were just talking about. And that's one of the exercises I use, which is called the reflected best self. And so it's asking folks, so the 3rd step, transform, but the reflected best self exercise is you go out and you ask 10, 15 people that know you really well, tell me a story where Camo was at his best. And then you take that story and you filter it through this is my spin on it. When I use internal family systems, which is that's how we start removing the parts, I am now asking you to filter those stories through the 8 C's and 5 P's of self, which is part of IFS, and we can dig into that. But it's not super important, but it's a way to look at self. And then we go for core values and we add in, what are some of those special things that you do that other folks don't do, right? And that's going to be in those stories, but it's also going to be, like, hey, I pick up the phone and the people on the other side, they buy. Or, I am the greatest connector of folks. Like Camo, one of your special gifts, right, is like you're connected to a network of folks. And I bet you if I said today, hey, like I want to meet a founder of a aerospace design company, you'd be like, oh, I know a guy.
Oh yeah,
And
I got a
I
guy.
weirdly
I got
have
a
people
guy.
like that too,
No doubt. No,
right?
I
But
mean,
it's like, yeah,
you're the same way, right? I think we are people that we got a guy or a gal, right? Because every person that we come across, my fraternity, Stephen Goodman, he put this in a very clear picture for me. As engineers with our background, we're constantly matching patterns and matching puzzles and matching pieces. And for both of us as kind of networking kind of people, that's what we do best, right? We have an internal Rolodex in our minds of people and what they do and who they are and how they match with each other. And just because a job description, okay, this person does this, they may not actually fit, right? So I think we both look at the lens empathetically and away from just what your resume says and says, you know what, I think you would just like this person, right? So it's like being professional matches of people, which I think is very powerful. And I think both of us share that ability and that also want to do, right? Because with all the networking that you've done, even internally within our community, how many introverts versus extroverts, if we did like a Myers-Briggs, right? How many do you think lean introverted versus extroverted?
it's funny. I'm not exactly sure about introvert versus extrovert, but it was like I did, like we interviewed Alex, and then he was like, "Oh, I listened to the pod with Olga," and I was like, "Well, have you talked to her? Do you want like I
Yeah,
can just send you her way? Like she knows you already." And then like Troy, like he's photonics, right? He
yeah.
developed like a photonic chip and stuff, and we come off the show, and I was like, I know one other person in photonics,
Hmm.
and she is a professor at University of Central Florida. And he's like, oh, I'm in Florida next week. And I was like, well, let me connect you. And
Yeah.
like, it turns out he presented GDS Factory to her department.
Oh my
And
gosh,
it's
dude, that's
like,
so cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's amazing.
yeah, it's
What is
like,
it?
it's pretty funny.
What is the utility that you get personally out of being this connector, being this coach? I mean, you're basically almost a therapist in some ways, right? I would love to feel like, do you get joy from that, from just the general sense of helping, or is there something deeper there?
Yeah. For me, my favorite clients to work with do both. And so that's where this is the fourth step, right? Is lead. And so as we learn, like after we learn who we are and our special talents that we have and how we show up in the world, now it's how do we go out and impact. And that's where it can be anything, right? And that can be, I want to do more externally facing things like podcasts or write a book or do TED or, become a speaker. Or it could be things like I want to, lead my team in a way that makes them more effective and more and happier and more engaged. And that's where I can use both like all the toolboxes. Like I always, like part of my coaching, I connect my clients with people that can help them achieve their goals, right? That is part of the package. With some executive coaches, they do not do this. They're like, my clients, they're only private, blah blah blah. No, 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 no. When you hire me, I am going to connect you with potential clients, with potential partners, with potential people that just you should meet. If
Yeah,
you want to do podcasts, I know people who host podcasts, right? Like Camo, I've introduced you to a few of those, right?
yeah.
It's like that's part of why you want to hire me. And so, and then also like leadership, like I can help you lead your team better. Like that's my job, right? So that's really the journey I want to go on with folks. Is some of it feels somewhat, it's not therapy, but it's therapy adjacent. And then it's, how do I mobile, or how do you mobilize yourself now that you see that goal out there, and maybe that goal shifts, but how do we get you where you want to go? Whether that's a promotion, starting your own company, building a brand outwardly or inwardly. That's something I coach a lot of folks on, is because it's part of building power and influence within a company, is exactly what you mentioned. You're in the elevator with the CEO of your company. What do you say about you?
Right. Right. Have you ever been personally in a situation where, because you're so good with people, that you couldn't connect, or that you were awestruck or fame struck or power struck or whatever that was, where you almost, because we know we don't, everyone's the same. Everyone is the same. We look eye to eye, pants on every day. Sometimes I don't, but most times I put on my pants.
Now with Zoom, we don't wear
Yeah, no,
pants.
yeah, exactly. But you know what I'm saying? Like, has there been that moment where then you have to refine yourself and your own skills? Like, how are you continuing to build your skills to be this incredible coach, incredible connector of people?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really get awestruck. And it's because of how I have connected with self. And so it is this, like, it's a practice. Like, I go to therapy every 2 weeks. Like, I practice myself, and it's where you look at people, like, you show up as you. And so there is no that imposter syndrome that some folks have. Well, actually, a lot of people, almost everybody has. But it's like that voice doesn't doesn't come in anymore because I work with it. And so it knows, like, hey, like when I went on Passion Struck podcast with John Miles, which is the #2 alternative health podcast, it's got 60,000 downloads, or sorry,
Wow.
60 million downloads.
60 million down. Holy cow. That's crazy.
And it was just like, I'm just showing up, and I know who I am. I know, like, what I speak about, and I'm here. And I think that's, like, for all my folks, like, I sometimes I even just coach folks on public speaking, right? But we still work on that piece, because you got to stand up in front of a crowd, and there's so much, there's a part of all of us which is like, we need to be accepted, because if we're not accepted, we're out of the tribe, and that means we die. And so that's why, like, literally, it's that primitive, right?
Wow. Yeah, totally. That
But
makes a lot
it's,
of sense.
but that's, you can.
I love that. And I would say that I don't think it's ever late for you to start that journey, when that starts happening. And I do like the fact that this 15-year reunion, at 5 years between 10 and 15, is significant exponentially. I think when people start their own families, they start looking at themselves inwardly through their children. As someone that doesn't have children, I just assume that's what it feels like. But obviously, a lot of our
Me
friends do,
either.
and yeah. So I mean, even having that ability to reflect in those moments and not feel the imposter syndrome as much, though. But if you do, I think Rob is definitely someone you want to chat with and talk to at the reunion or outside of that, right? Because it's probably an ongoing thing, into a certain point where, I remember my mother told me a long time ago, she's like, you realize that, like, and I was a little kid at the time, like, you realize that when you're lying to me, son, I can read, I'm 30 years older than you. I get this. You don't impress me. There's nothing you can do that ever will impress me. And I'm like, okay, heard, understood. And so they have that level of just being able to freely, again, we're all in the same room together. Anytime you're in a room with someone, right? I think you've had, the walls are done. They're completely out. And I think having that ability and working with you that's an incredible gift that you can give to people. So I'm super excited to see everyone's transformation as they talk to you. Speaking of that reunion, have you figured out what your talk is going to be about? Have you
Of
started
course,
planning
it's
that
going to
yet?
be on capitalizing on chaos.
Yes,
And
sir.
I mean, if there's not chaos today, I do not know what chaos is.
Seriously, there's so much, right? I mean, a lot of emotions and feelings, and then you layer in the fact that if you've started a family, how do you protect your children from all of this chaos? So that's super intriguing. So besides the book, what else do we got in 2025 that we're looking forward to from a life perspective, a career perspective? What is on the Rob 2025 roadmap?
Yeah. I mean, if I can ask for help from the MIT community, it would be if you know somebody who books speakers at your company or workshops, definitely reach out to me. My LinkedIn and my email are in the podcast notes, or you can go to robkalwarowsky.com. Um, that would be my primary ask. And it's like we can do anything from 45-minute keynote to a multi-day workshop, right? But basically that's really the help I'm asking for. Of course, if you want one-on-one coaching, or your team has coaching, or you have a leadership development budget that you want to spend on me, I'm happy to help you
Yeah.
with that too, right? And it's like what Camo said about the imposter syndrome, right? This is something that when you get to self, and this is part of that 4-step process, this is when you can grow in a way that's limitless because there's no barriers going, well, Rob, you're not good enough to do that. Well, you shouldn't reach out to this person because they're at this level and you're only at this level. Or you shouldn't talk to this person, or you shouldn't be in this room, or you shouldn't, right? And we all have had those thoughts, right? I've had them too. I still get them sometimes, right? But now I know how to work with that. And so that's where you can go, oh, hey, thought, hey, part of me that doesn't think that, it's all right. I got it.
Yeah.
And then
This
you
is
can do it.
it's so apropos to we're millennials, right? So I know Gen Z is all about anxiety and talking about it, and we're getting better about it, but we're also partially in that era that when we grew up, we didn't talk about these kind of things. We didn't really talk about feelings and therapy, and it was almost kind of like, we're fine. We'll outsmart it, right? We'll use our knowledge base to figure it out. But I think you being at the forefront of this is so important and crucial. And, I guess this kind of leads to the ultimate question, which has been the one that has been the most revealing and rewarding is today, how would you like to impact the world?
Yeah. I want to change leadership globally. And the reason is because of everything we're seeing. And I was listening to, what podcast was it? I forget, the other day, and they were talking about how like 71% of countries now have an authoritarian government. And it's, in the United States, right, you're looking at Trump and basically Elon. And it's like those folks are the classic, if you watch my TED or look into the research, they're the classic abusive narcissistic boss. And it's not that they're bad people. It's that there's a part of them that is acting out because of something that they believe about themselves. Like they're not good enough, or they don't deserve it, or they're unlovable, or they don't belong. Whatever that is, they have to go to therapy and do the deeper work, right? They can't even do that with me because it's so overactive that it's not possible. But that kind of behavior that we see in the world is pervasive, not only in governments, but also in companies. And we're having a shift, right? And I think we're all seeing it, is the wealth gap is bigger than it was before the French Revolution. And if we don't shift, especially with AI, which is going to spread it even further, we're going to have a big problem. And so we need to move on it now. And that's why I'm moving on. Well, I've been moving on it for a while, but it's my mission to keep working on this and to make it as big as I can, because we need to shift away from this, whatever that old school nonsense is, because people are suffering and we can prevent that.
I think that's really critical. I mean, so I sit in the seat where I see it every day, right? My clients that have made substantial wealth for the last few years, they could have earned it 5% tax free, literally just to grow their own coffers. And now you do kind of find those that are more giving and want to, but the reality is that gap gets wider and wider every day. This past week, I was at a robotics company seeing these humanoids truly taking, the ability to take jobs from people, and they will, and they are. But with that said, the silver lining to me is that human ingenuity, human ability to adapt, right, can work, but we have to work together in that, right? So if you could describe kind of what do you see as the solution or at least the right ethos in order for us to rebridge, right? What does that look like that is non-French Revolution? No one needs to get their head cut off kind of situation.
Well, first off, Will Smith has to save us from the humanoid robots.
100%, 100%. No, they're not. They're not. Listen, you can still push one over. It's not getting up. Don't worry.
That's right. But like, what I'm not saying, right, that we need, like, we don't need a revolution, and we don't also need these these leaders or these wealthy folks to be like, oh, I'm just gonna give away all my money, right? Like, if that was the case, then they're not on board, right? But what it is about is when we run our companies, when we're in the world, that we have some version of empathy because we know who we are. And the behaviors that lead us down these paths of we'll cut somebody down to make an extra dollar, that's from a place of fear and from a place of not being something. And again, sometimes it shows up as imposter syndrome. Sometimes it shows up as narcissism. Sometimes it shows up as, like you're Jeff Bezos and you just want to make a gajillion dollars, right? It's various degrees. But ultimately, we're all the same. We all have parts of us that do all of those things. But if we return to self and we start leading in our communities the way that we all naturally would have done, that's what's going to change the world.
I love that. I think the word that I hear from you that is the unique factor that separates us from our own creation of these robots is empathy. Empathy is so beautiful, right? It is a human emotion that it's very hard to quantify, right? But I'm sure it's, for me, when I describe what that means, it's a connection that produces actual chemical brains in your body, right? It produces serotonin, dopamine, then there's a difference, huge difference, in my opinion, between empathy and sympathy, right?
That's right.
And so I think the more empathetic we can be as leaders, as within our community, within even our small leadership, because every conversation, that you have with someone is you can become a leader in that just with that one person, right? And you lead each other, right? It's that saying, Art Lab, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. So with that, Rob, within our own community that we're creating, that you've taken the mantle, and I'm so grateful that you have, So what are some of the impacts that you hope to see out of not just the reunion, but in terms of now our own leadership producing into the world? What is it that do you have a vision for any of this? What is the way that we can now take some of this tangible? We all agree we want to do this. What's the next step here?
I do love this question. And I've been really leaning into this the last couple of years one is I want to start doing retreats down in Costa Rica.
Yes, yes.
And so I have that on my to-do list. It doesn't look like it'll happen this fall, but probably next year we'll do at least one, if not multiple. And this will be just for folks to, we'll do some work, of course, some breath work, or we could figure out what that looks like, but we'll work on, ultimately it'll be how do we start impacting the world in a different way, right? And we've had guests on this show. There's been multiple guests who have talked to me about philanthropy and wanting to make a difference. We have, folks on the show like Olga, who's out there. She's trying to create an open source genome map of the diversity in the ocean. You have Alex, who's out there trying to make a difference in neurodegenerative diseases. Like, we have a lot of incredible people who are out there trying to make a difference. And so now it's just, how do we connect with each other so we can leverage all the things that we're doing and the people that we know to make that impact, right? And it's like, that's where Camo, you and I as super connectors, it's like we can pull folks together, and then we know who fits with who. And we know, hey, you're on this mission. You're also on this mission. Why don't we connect you two and you guys can work together? or it's sort of, you know, somewhat captaining the ship, but also we're letting people be at their best. And that's really what I see coming out of this is I want us to connect more often, like whether that's virtually, also in person. And like I'm going to figure out a way how to host it. So we're going to make it happen.
Please. Yeah. I mean, one, sign me up for that first Costa Rica retreat. I'm down. I'm in. I think if you even did just even on a Zoom, hey, listen, monthly. It's every last Friday of the month. Rob's gonna host. Whoever jumps on, just jump on, right? And we can create and shape and form stuff. But there's a Signal group that's out there right now for all the 2010s that can jump on, lean into, right? Jump on this pod because it's so rewarding to one, not just have this connection, but also like selfishly, like now you can say, and I can look back to my episode. I know Murph can look back at his and say, I described my life as best I know it, right? And this can be something that down the road your kids can look at it. Shout out Ben Bersanti. I need you to do this pod, and I know we talked about that. So anyway, but I love that, Rob. I think taking the momentum that we've created and not letting it just trickle out and die down just by being a constant bastion that you are. Let's do it. Let's totally do it. In Costa Rica, I've never been. It looks beautiful, amazing. Can you just quickly describe your life in Costa Rica? What took you there and, where you're at right now?
Yeah. So what took me there, kind of funny, actually, we had never been here. I was like working still, and my wife, she took she took time off from, well, she quit her job basically because we knew we wanted to move to do at least a year. And so she was doing the research and she found Costa Rica as like the most safest, at least politically. We were also looking at, some of the digital nomad visas that had popped up during COVID as like, hey, like I still have a Canadian business and I work here, right? So it still works. But yeah, my life, I mean, I live in a community of farmers, like coffee farmers around me. The Del Monte pineapple fields are about 15 minutes that way. It's like we see probably 50 species of birds right from where I'm sitting right now. Just like we put out some plantains for them on the fence, like 10 feet away from me.
No
And
way.
they show up every morning and every afternoon. Like it's what you'll notice the moment you step off the plane is, and it's a feeling I've never felt anywhere else I've been. Like I've gone to Mexico, Dominican Republic, and there's still that energy of people are hustling and bustling and they want you to move. And a lot of it's like they're very touristy, and also Costa Rica is as well. But there's something in the air here that's like a big sigh, and your system just goes, ooh. And for me, it actually took my coaching to the next level. Like it was like literally like a month after being here, I was like, holy shit, I'm way better as a coach. And like I didn't do anything. Like I went to a retreat for a week, but it wasn't like this thing where I like had this huge learning. It was just like, oh, my feeling of being relaxed helps me with my clients. And I think for folks out there, like that's why it's like a retreat here will be very different than if we did one in Boston or Miami or LA or wherever. It's just like the way you'll be in nature. There's an incredible venue. It's an hour, 15 minutes from here called Holos. They grow all the stuff that they eat on property. There's 5 different waterfalls on property. It's just a beautiful venue. It's incredible. And like, yeah, you'll
I
love it.
mean, sounds like paradise. I can't wait to be there. I can't wait to see you in literally 2 months, which is so exciting. Is there anything you want to kind of leave the audience with as we kind of wrap up here?
For me, I always want people to know that they have a choice. Because for me, it took me so long and so many years of therapy to get my choice back. And you have a choice to do whatever you want to do, right? And Chris said it last week, right? Is like you have a choice to break the mold, to do something that's uncomfortable or different, right? And that can be anything. That can be you reach out and you say, hey, Rob, I want to hire you as a coach. It can be, hey, I want to move cities. I want to quit my job and start my own business. I want to pivot industries. I want to become a surfer. I want to hike Mount Everest. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, but you know what it is that you want to do. And that's the best thing I can say is go out and do it. Choose to do it, because ultimately that will put you on a path that 5 years from now, you won't know where you're going to end up. And I can say that because 5 years before, I did not know I was going to be here.
Yeah, I love that. That is the best advice, to be a doer, right? You can plan, have all those ideas, but at the end of the day, do it, fail as you do it, and you will get stronger through it. Life is, I mean, listen, we're 35, 36 in that range, right? I mean, we still got at least half of our life to live, if not longer. I mean, so just, there's just beginning, honestly. The next 10 years are going to be so golden for us, that I think having and pivoting and shifting and trying, continue to do so. Like, it's just because you even have child or children doesn't mean that that means you're also capped. Absolutely not, right? If anything, that do things with them and experience and see life through their lens and their eyes, and remember your own inner child as well. So I love that, man. You're such an inspiration to me. I really, really commend you for doing this. And again, doing this because you did this. This was a one conversation we had, and next thing you're like, hey, let's start this, right? So you're an exemplary leader. I'm so appreciative of your own coaching with me. And I highly recommend everyone to reach out to Rob in every capacity. This man is truly uniquely special and gifted, and we're all grateful for knowing you, brother. So thank you.
Thank you so much, folks. And of course, robkalwarowsky.com, or you can send me an email, rob@robkalwarowsky.com. And yeah, again, if you know somebody who books events, if your company hires speakers, or you have leadership development trainings or anything like that, I would love a connection to the person who does that. Or if you do that, I would love to talk to you. So yeah, definitely reach out. My LinkedIn is in the podcast notes, as well as my email. Of course, if you want to come on the show, also reach out. You can reach out to me or Camo. He's my booker. So you can reach out to Camo, and he'll
Absolutely.
push you on the show.
You got it. There's a long list that we got going on now, so holler at me. Appreciate you, Rob. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Camo. We'll see you all next week.
Talk soon. Bye bye.